Hello there, this is All 24 News World News program coming to you live from Algiers. I'm your host Islam Said. To the headlines. 14 were killed by Zionist forces as the aggression on Jenin enters the fifth day. The city's hospital is besieged and raids and arrests were carried across the West Bank. One killed and several wounded by occupation gunfire in Gaza. Hamas blames the entity for ceasefire disruption and 200 Palestinian prisoners released in exchange deal. Also coming up, political parties and observers accuse European Parliament of yielding to French far-right. The Arab Parliament condemns EU's Algeria list as unacceptable interference. And Sahrawi civilian prisoners in Akdim Izid group endure humiliating searches and harassment. Polisario condemns Moroccan occupation as state terrorism in occupied Sahrawi territories. Hello again and welcome back to the program. First off, in our news, the Zionist occupation forces have intensified their assault on Jenin for the fifth consecutive day, resulting in widespread destruction of homes, infrastructure, and significant casualties. Drone strikes targeted Mithaloun and Qabatiyya, killing 2 young men, while raids and arrests continue to spread across the governorate. Bulldozers have demolished vital roads and town entrances. According to the Palestinian news agency, 14 Palestinians have been killed, dozens injured, and many more arrested since the aggression began. Still in Palestine, on Saturday, Zionist occupation forces besieged Jenin Governmental Hospital, blocking ambulance crews from reaching the wounded. The Palestinian Information Center reported that the forces have surrounded the hospital for the fifth day. The Palestinian Red Crescent confirmed that medics have been prevented from treating the injured, leaving many to bleed in the streets. To some ground developments, on Saturday, the Jenin Battalion of Al-Quds Brigades announced that it targeted Zionist occupation forces in Jenin, detonating a ground explosive device in Al-Basatin axis, causing confirmed injuries. Meanwhile, the occupation forces acknowledged that 3 of their members were injured during clashes with the Palestinian resistance as the air and ground aggression continues for the 5th consecutive day. In the West Bank still, on Saturday, Zionist occupation forces conducted raids and arrests in Nablus, storming homes in the northern mountain areas and Ain camp, where they detained 2 Palestinian youths. Palestinian media also reported that the occupation forces imposed closures and tightened restrictions at checkpoints around Ramallah. A Palestinian was killed and several others, including a woman, were injured when Zionist occupation forces opened fire on displaced civilians attempting to return home via Salah ad-Din Street in central Gaza Strip. The Palestinian Information Center, citing medical sources, reported that the occupation forces specifically targeted the civilians with a gunfire. On Saturday, the Zionist occupation released 200 Palestinian prisoners as part of an exchange deal with Hamas. Buses carrying 114 of the released prisoners from the occupied West Bank arrived in Baytuniya in Ramallah, while 16 prisoners were transported to Gaza via the Karm Abu Salam crossing, and 70 prisoners were exiled to Egypt through the Rafah crossing. In Ramallah, crowds celebrated the release, lifting the freed prisoners on their shoulders and waving victory signs. The prisoners expressed their gratitude to the Palestinian resistance in Gaza for facilitating the exchange deal. As part of the exchange deal and ceasefire agreement, the Palestinian resistance handed over 4 female Zionist prisoners to the Red Cross in Gaza. The handover took place in Palestine Square, attended by members of the Al-Qassam and Al-Quds brigades, along with thousands of Palestinians. Hamas broadcast a video documenting the transfer, showing the prisoners in military uniform released in good health. A handover agreement was signed between Al-Qassam brigades and the Red Cross.
السلام عليكم مرحبا شكرا لك.
هؤلاء المجندات. Returning these female soldiers in this honorable manner confirms the enemy's failure to achieve its most important goal for recovering the female soldiers and prisoners without paying the price or giving the resistance any image of victory. What happened proves the opposite, as the occupation hopes that the resistance will submit and hand over the prisoners without a price, but the opposite happened.
It's a great feeling. Thank God, our wishes come true. Personally, I have 2 relatives who died for our homeland, and all these people are happy with the release of prisoners.
Palestinian prisoners freed under the ceasefire agreement arrived in Khan Yunis on Saturday, where they were warmly greeted by their families after years of captivity. This release is part of the ongoing exchanges under the ceasefire deal. Let's get more details now with Salman Nisib.
Crowds of Palestinians, including the families of released prisoners, gathered to greet them as they arrived from the Zionist military prison of Afar, transported by the International Committee of the Red Cross to the European hospital in Khan Yunis. Many of the freed prisoners are still processing their release, unable to fully grasp the significance of their newfound freedom after enduring years of imprisonment and hardship.
We thank the Palestinian resistance, specifically Al-Qassam brigades and Al-Quds brigades, and we thank every Palestinian resistance fighter, particularly the Azad-Din Al-Qassam brigades who liberated our prisoners. No prisoner dreamt to be free, and this is the largest deal in Palestinian nation history the world could see. This is by the grace of God and then Al-Qassam brigades.
Moments after the release of some Palestinian prisoners, joyous scenes erupted in the streets of Gaza as relatives of the released prisoners cheered and marked the occasion with heartfelt celebrations.
By God, there is a feeling of joy and pride on this day of victory. Praise be to God that He granted us this day after a long wait and long years. Praise be to God, He granted us this day. A feeling of dignity, joy, a feeling of victory, despite the pain. A moment when you could have been a martyr, but praise be to God, Lord of the worlds, who allowed us to see Him. Praise be to God who kept us steadfast on this land. Praise be to God, despite the genocide we experienced.
The Zionist prison service confirmed the release of 200 prisoners after Hamas freed 4 Zionist female soldiers on Saturday. This was the second exchange since the January 19 ceasefire, following an earlier swap, in which Hamas released 3 Zionist civilians in exchange for 90 Palestinian prisoners. These exchanges are part of a broader effort to secure the release of Palestinian political prisoners from Zionist jails.
Still with the prisoner exchange deal, Hamas confirmed that the Zionist prisoner Ariel Yehuda, held by the resistance, is still alive and will be released as part of the exchange deal next Saturday. This statement was made in response to doubts raised by Netanyahu regarding her status. Hamas also accused the Zionist occupation of delaying the implementation of the ceasefire and prisoner exchange terms, particularly mentioning the ongoing closure of Rashid Street and the obstruction of displaced persons' return. Hamas urged the occupation to fulfill its obligations under the agreement. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reported a significant decrease in aid trucks entering Gaza on Friday, with only 339 trucks arriving instead of the expected 600. This is part of the first phase of the ceasefire agreement, which lasts 6 weeks and includes 50 fuel trucks. Half of the trucks are designated for northern Gaza, where experts warn of an impending famine. The UN noted that over 4,208 trucks entered Gaza during the first week of the ceasefire.
Regarding the aid, there is an improvement, but it is slow so far and not as we had expected. They said that after 7 days of the ceasefire, there would be better and faster progress, which is what we hope for.
We have noticed gradual improvement so far. And regarding the aid, thank God, it is evident that assistance is being provided.
The Gaza Strip now faces the immense challenge of reconstruction, beginning with clearing 40 million tons of rubble left by over 15 months of intense bombings by the Zionist entity. According to the UN, the relentless bombings have reversed Gaza's development by 60 years. Mobilizing the tens of billions of dollars needed for reconstruction is expected to be an extremely difficult task. Despite threats from the Zionist occupation and the widespread destruction of their homes, displaced Palestinians from both the north and south of Gaza remain determined to return. Their actions send a powerful message of unwavering commitment to their land following months of genocide crimes and efforts to forcibly displace them from the besieged Strip. For more, here's Zahar Farjani.
Thousands of displaced Palestinians in southern Gaza are preparing to return to their neighborhoods in the north. On Rashid Street, families are once again gathering, waiting for the green light to head back home. But for many, the return is bittersweet.
We lived 15 months as if they were 15 years, suffering all the while. These 15 months felt like a lifetime of hardship. They announced that displaced people would return today or tomorrow, so we dismantled our tent and secured our belongings. Thank God this is the best news we've heard about the return of the displaced.
Palestinian families began dismantling their tents and packing their belongings, expressing their deep longing for their homes.
We want to go back to our homes. We're exhausted. Our families are still in Gaza City, and we want to see them. Enough. My brothers were killed and buried in Gaza, and we didn't even get to see them. We want to visit their graves. Enough. We've had enough. If they allow us to return home now, I will be the first to enter.
But as displaced families eagerly anticipate their return after a long ordeal, the path back home is far from certain. Despite an agreement made under a ceasefire deal, delays have thrown these plans into disarray.
We are calling for help now. People are suffering, waiting without food or drink or anything. They are all waiting to return to the Gaza City. Everyone wants to return to their homes. I'm waiting and I'm staying until the morning, until they open the road and I return. Why are they treating us like this? The hostages, they took them. What is left for them? Open the way for us to return. That's enough.
For now, the wait continues, with many hoping that the path back home will open sooner rather than later, as they navigate the uncertainties of war and loss in their fight to return to Gaza.
In our other topic on news, a Lebanese man was injured by gunfire from the Zionist occupation forces on Saturday as they breached the ceasefire and advanced into several southern towns. The forces targeted the man in Nabatia Governorate and moved into over 5 areas, closing roads and bulldozing infrastructure in the region. Similarly, the Zionist occupation forces have renewed their threats to residents of southern Lebanon, preventing them from returning to their homes after being forcibly displaced during the aggression. The Lebanese news agency reported that displaced residents in the Nabatia region received threatening voice messages on their phones from international numbers warning them not to return to their towns. This comes despite the expiration of the 60-day deadline for the withdrawal of the Zionist forces from Lebanese territory. In Lebanon still, the Zionist occupation announced on Friday that it would maintain its forces in the eastern sector of Lebanon beyond the 60-day period. Hebrew media reported that the occupation will not withdraw from southern Lebanon, citing Lebanon's failure to fully implement the ceasefire agreement as the reason for their decision. On a different note, the European Parliament has become involved in the French far right's campaign against Algeria by issuing a list on the country's human rights situation. Observers widely condemn this as a blatant interference in Algeria's internal affairs, noting that many members of the parliament are convicted or accused of corruption and accepting bribes from the Moroccan regime. Meanwhile, the Arab Parliament condemned the European Parliament's statement on Algeria, describing it as a blatant and unacceptable interference in Algeria's internal affairs. In a statement, the Arab Parliament called on the European body to halt such actions which violate international conventions and urged it not to politicize the human rights issue or use it as a pretext for unjustified interference in the internal affairs of sovereign countries.
The Algerian Republic is a country governed by laws and constitutional institutions that enjoy independent decision-making. In addition to judicial bodies capable of providing all the necessary guarantees to protect freedoms, human rights and freedom of expression for every Algerian citizen, the members of the European Parliament did not lift a finger and remained inactive, turning a blind eye when human rights were being violated in Palestine and a genocide was being committed against the Palestinian people in every sense of the word before the eyes of the world. The European Parliament today has no right to give lessons to Algeria or the Arab countries in applying the law and protecting freedoms.
On another front, the UN Security Council adopted a presidential statement on Friday initiated by Algeria, recognizing the African Union's role in combating terrorism. This marks the first international acknowledgement of Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboun's leadership in preventing and fighting terrorism, a responsibility entrusted to him by his African counterparts. At Algeria's insistence, the statement also emphasized the crucial role of existing African mechanisms, underscoring the growing maturity of the continent's security framework.
For the first time and at Algeria's strong urging, the essential role of existing African mechanisms was acknowledged, particularly the African Intelligence and Security Services Committee, the African Standby Forces Counter-Terrorism Unit, and AFRIPOL. This recognition highlights the growing maturity of the continental security framework. The UN Secretary-General is now tasked with providing annual reports on the joint efforts between the African Union and the United Nations to combat terrorism in Africa, establishing an unprecedented regular monitoring mechanism. This move marks a significant step toward institutionalizing the partnership between the African Union and the UN in the fight against terrorism.
In another update in Africa, the Moroccan Occupation Administration at 8 Melloul prison conducted a humiliating and provocative search of several cells belonging to members of the Akdimizi group. The Association for the Protection of the Sahara Prisoners reported that around 8 a.m., prison staff raided the cells of Mohammed Banni, Sayyid Ahmed Lamjid and Ibrahim Ismaili, subjecting them to insults, curses and threats, while also tampering with their personal belongings. In light of this, Sidi Mohammed Ammar, the Polisario Front's representative to the UN and coordinator for the MINURSO mission, stated on Saturday that Morocco is a rogue state that sponsors and exports cross-border terrorism. In an interview with Radio Algiers International, Ammar emphasized that Morocco has been practicing state terrorism in the occupied areas of the Sahrawi Republic since 1975. Shifting focus, the U.S. administration has decided to suspend financial aid to Morocco for at least 90 days. On Friday, the U.S. State Department issued an order halting both old and new foreign aid to Rabat, amounting to millions of dollars until each new funding request or extension is reviewed and approved in line with President Donald Trump's agenda.
And to exchange with you on our many shared interests.
Still in Morocco, human rights groups and parliamentarians have accused the Moroccan government of neglecting public health, resulting in dozens of measles deaths. Lawmakers warned of a crisis due to the disease spread, a shortage of medical staff and equipment, and ongoing protests. Activists criticized the silence of the Ministries of Education and Health. The Moroccan Ministry of Health reported 120 child deaths and 25,000 infections since September 2023.
بالنسبة لي أنا إعلامية مني ما كيتواصلش السياسي.
For me, as a media professional, any politician or official who avoids communication creates room for rumors and misinformation. For example, there has been a government reshuffle, and yet, as of today, the Minister of Health has not addressed any media outlet. Mr. Tahrawi has not appeared on television. The Minister of National Education, Mohammed Saad bin Rada, has not been heard on TV to date, nor has Mr. Ahmed Bouari. I am specifically addressing ministers that are directly concerned with the daily concerns of the Moroccans. Today, 6th grade exams were held, yet large number of students were unable to take the exams due to the measles outbreak.
كاين نسبة كبيرة من ديال الوليدات راه ما تمتحنوش. علاش؟ بسبب بوحمرون.
Moving on, but in Africa still, a drone attack on Friday evening targeted at least the last functioning hospital in El Fasher, North Darfur, killing 67 people and injuring dozens. The bombing of the Saudi hospital resulted in patient and companion deaths, extensive injuries, and damage to the emergency department. Meanwhile, the Sudanese army regained control of the Jili refinery from the Rapid Support Forces following fierce fighting that caused the fire. The army also announced that it had broken the siege on its command center in central Khartoum. Elsewhere, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky urged allies to work on a formula for future peace talks with Russia. During a press conference in Kiev, he emphasized the importance of including Ukraine in any negotiations to ensure their success. And in the USA, the Trump administration has increased deportations using military cargo planes, with flights landing in Guatemala. Critics claim the operation targeting the hardened criminals has led to arrests, including U.S. citizens. The situation worsens as Mexico blocks deportation flights. Yasin Erikti reports now.
The Trump administration has ramped up its deportation campaign, now deploying military planes to return migrants to their home countries. In El Paso, shackled detainees were seen boarding military cargo planes, with flights landing in Guatemala this morning.
I think that there are people who really commit crimes, and there are people who do nothing. They have been living there for years, and I think that those people should have an opportunity to do something, not to be deported just like that. And the way they treat us, the way they bring us, is a very ugly way.
Homeland Security officials call it a crackdown on hardened criminals, but critics argue it's a heavy-handed approach. Over 500 undocumented migrants were arrested nationwide in the last 24 hours, doubling the daily average under the previous administration. In New York, ICE agents faced backlash for a controversial raid, accused of detaining U.S. citizens alongside undocumented workers. The mayor condemned the operation, calling it unconstitutional.
When I got this information, I was appalled, upset, angry that this would happen here. In this state, in this country, that this would be allowed. How do you determine who's undocumented and who's a criminal just by looking at them?
Mexico has reportedly denied access to U.S. deportation flights, further complicating the administration's plans. Amidst this, President Trump remains firm in defending his administration's approach, asserting it aligns with his commitment to secure the border and prioritize the welfare of American citizens.
I will declare a national emergency at our southern border. We will reinstate my Remain in Mexico policy.
The debate continues, with both sides digging in their heels over the future of U.S. immigration policy.
Let's get more news stories making headlines around the globe in the Newsroom Brief with Sofian Kenturi now.
Russia's defense ministry announced on Saturday that its air defense systems shot down 44 Ukrainian drones and intercepted 3 U.S.-made HIMARS missiles over its territory. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for an urgent ceasefire in Sudan, stressing the need for a lasting political solution. He expressed deep concern over escalating violence near Khartoum and in Darfur, urging all parties to protect civilians and allow humanitarian aid. A lawyer for South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol demanded his immediate release on Saturday. The Seoul Central District Court had rejected a prosecution request to extend his detention over a probe into his brief martial law declaration on December 3rd. US President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump visited a neighborhood devastated by the Palisades fire near Los Angeles. They spoke with residents and firefighters about their experiences. Trump has criticized California's wildfire response as 3 major fires continue to threaten the region.
That's the end of our news program for tonight. Good night.